I grew up in the barrio. I mean, we know some people say we were poor and we didn't know it. We knew we were poor. We had an old black and white television and we saw how the other side lived. Spoke no English. When I was 6 years old, first day of school, no English. My parents spoke very little. My dad was a janitor. My mom used to clean houses. I would go do yard work on Saturdays with my father, and we would charge $25 per lawn, and I would help him on Saturdays. They spoke very little English, and I spoke zero when I was 6 years old. On the first day of school, it was before bilingual education. Forget it. There was no preschool or kindergarten or any of that. So right away I get thrown into the first day of school, first grade, first day of school. The teacher doesn't speak Spanish. I don't speak English. The bell rings at 10 in the morning, right? So it's recess. And all the kids go out to play. And what does little John Quiñones do? I went home. I went home. And my mother goes, Juanito, ¿qué pasó? What are you doing here? And I said, it's over, Mom. I love school. 2 hours, and you get out of there. She's like, grabbed me by the ear and took me back to class. And then my sister, who was 3 years ahead of me, tells me that they would always call her and say, Irma, your little brother, he refuses to speak English. Can you tell him he has to learn English? So she would come to my room and she would pull me out into the hall and she'd say, Juanito, tienes que hablar inglés. You have to speak English. You have to learn. And she said, I would tell her, pero ¿por qué no hablan ellos en español? Why don't they learn Spanish? When I was 13, we were migrant farm workers. My family joined a caravan. My father was let go from work. So we followed a caravan, got in the back of a truck, and we traveled all the way to Michigan. The first time I left Texas was to go pick tomatoes up north of Traverse City, Michigan. Cherries in Michigan. And then we followed the crops down to Ohio, outside of Toledo, to pick tomatoes. And I'll never forget, being there on my knees on the cold, wet ground at 6 in the morning and looking at a row of tomato plants that seemed to go for miles and miles. And my father saying, listen, do you want to do this for the rest of your life? Or do you want to get an education? It was a no-brainer. Of course, I wanted that. No one in my family, though, had gone to college, so I didn't know how I was going to get there. But thank God there was a program called Upward Bound that the government had. And they took kids from the inner city who showed some promise. And I don't know what they saw in me, but they saw something. They took 10 students from my high school. And basically they would prepare you with remedial classes on Saturdays. And every summer of your high school career, for 6 weeks, you will go to college.